Have you ever been in that situation where you're trying to help someone, you give them what you think is just brilliant advice, and it completely backfires? Yeah, you are definitely not alone. So today, let's dive into this really common, very human paradox: why our best intentions to help can so often go completely wrong. And this brings me to a woman named Nana. She'd been through a lot in her life, overcame some huge challenges, and she was just desperate to share what she'd learned. This quote right here, it just perfectly captures her frustration. She genuinely wanted to help, to make things easier for the people she cared about. But somewhere along the way, something was getting lost in translation. And that really gets us to the core question here. Why is it that well-intentioned advice, the kind that comes from a good place, so often ends up creating distance instead of connection? Nana's story, it actually holds the key, and it's a lesson that, well, it applies to pretty much all of us. So let's take a closer look at Nana's situation. She would see people struggling, and drawing from her own tough experiences, she would offer up what she saw as the perfect, helpful solution. Her motives? They were pure compassion. But here's the crucial disconnect. While Nana thought she was speaking from a place of love, the people on the receiving end, they heard something totally different. They didn't hear, "I care about you." What they heard was, "I know better than you. You should do what I say." And as you can imagine, that created resentment. It actually pushed people away. So, what was really going on here? Well, this is where we get to the root of the problem. When Nana was dishing out advice, it wasn't just her compassionate self that was speaking. There was another voice in the mix, and that's the voice of the ego. Now, it's really important how we define the ego in this context. It's not some kind of evil villain living inside of us. Nope. It's simply the part of our psyche that has a very specific agenda. It wants to be right, it wants to be in control, and it really wants to feel important. And it is incredibly crafty at disguising this whole agenda as just being helpful. So, how can you spot the ego in action? Well, there are some pretty clear telltale signs. Just ask yourself, does the urge to speak involve interrupting someone or a desperate need to prove your point? Does it involve comparing or judging or trying to control the whole conversation? These are all major red flags that the ego has grabbed the microphone. But okay, if the ego is one voice inside of us, what's the alternative? Well, it's what we can call the higher self, that quieter, wiser part of you that's really focused on connection, not on correction. Let's just take a look at how different these two voices really are. This comparison here makes the difference crystal clear. While the ego just jumps in, it judges, and it absolutely needs to be right, the higher self steps back. It listens. It seeks to understand, not to fix. It trusts that the other person is on their own unique journey and, deep down, has their own answers. And this, right here, is the fundamental shift in thinking. The most helpful thing we can do for someone is often not to provide a solution, but to simply be present with them. By listening without judgment, we create this safe space where people feel comfortable enough to explore their own thoughts and, ultimately, find their own way forward. Now, this whole dynamic isn't just about giving advice. This battle between the ego and the higher self, it plays out in all of our conversations, and most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. The truth is, we're not nearly as in control of what we say as we like to think we are. Okay, get ready for this because it's a pretty startling number. Psychologists actually suggest that less than 10% of our spontaneous speech comes from our conscious, intentional mind. So, what about the other 90+%? Well, that's just bubbling up from our unconscious, all those habits and beliefs and feelings that we're not even aware of. So, what does that unconscious, ego-driven chatter actually look like in daily life? It probably looks pretty familiar. It's automatically repeating some bad news you just heard. It's gossiping. It's getting stuck in these loops about old hurts or constantly criticizing and judging things. We often do these things on complete autopilot, not even realizing that we're just reinforcing negativity. All right, so the ego is powerful, it's sneaky, it's running on autopilot. How in the world do we deal with it? Well, the answer might surprise you. You don't fight it head on. A full frontal assault just makes the ego put up its shields and fight back even harder. The real answer is compassion. And this leads to a really beautiful paradox. To manage the ego, you have to embrace it. You treat it with the same patience and loving kindness that you would offer a child who's having a tantrum or a scared, wounded animal. It's just doing the best it can with its current level of development. By accepting it instead of fighting it, you actually take away its power. So here's a really practical tool you can use in the moment. Before you jump into help, just pause and ask yourself these 5 questions. This simple checklist, it acts like a filter, helping you figure out if this is an ego-driven impulse or a genuine, compassionate desire to connect. Ultimately, the path to improving your conversations with other people, it begins with one person, you. It all starts by paying closer attention to your own inner monologue and the kind of energy you're putting out into the world. This is where self-awareness becomes your absolute superpower. And here's a simple, really practical way to do that. For just 1 week, keep a simple tally. No judgment, okay? Just observation. Every time you catch yourself making one of these comments, just put a little check mark in the right column. You might be really surprised by the ratio of negative to positive at the end of the week. So what's the goal with this little tally? Well, a lot of research on relationships gives us a target to aim for, and it's known as the Lasada ratio. It turns out that for a really healthy, happy connection with someone, you need at least 3 positive interactions to balance out every 1 negative interaction. This simple goal can absolutely transform your relationships. And all of this leaves us with a final thought to take with you. The next time you find yourself about to speak, whether you're going to offer advice or just make a comment, just pause for a single second and ask yourself this question. Is it the ego needing to be right? Or is it your higher self seeking to connect? The choice is always yours.